What's up, folks? This is Addy Ads. This is Public Intelligence once again. We got a great guest on the show this evening, Conspiracy Kyle, host of Conspiracy in the Forest podcast and author who, as far as I know, it recently released his first book, which we can talk about as well. But I want to thank you for coming on the show, Kyle. And could you also please just beef up your introduction for people who may not be familiar with your work?
Sure. Yeah. Thanks again for having me on. I really appreciate it. Yeah. So my name is Conspiracy Kyle. My podcast is called Conspiracy in the Force. I'm the Star Wars guy, right? Like everybody knows, like that person in your life, right? Oh, that's the Star Wars guy. That's that's the sports guy. That's the football guy. I'm the Star Wars guy, and that's really been what I've been into most of my life. But over the past few years, really starting to reconfigure my brain into really realizing all the crazy manipulation that goes on in our world, all the crazy conspiracies, all the stories that we're told to be true that are actually false, or all the narratives that are being pushed are anything but. So I've been really delving into that, and like I said, reconfiguring my brain into everything I thought I knew about the world. Has been pretty much wrong. And so when I had that realization, I thought, I'm wondering if there's a way to kind of meld that understanding and that continued. And then last year, I went on some shows with some really great guests like Sam Tripoli, Charlie Robinson, and a bunch of other people. And in the process of doing that, talking about the Star Wars and conspiracy parallels here, I started developing this idea in my mind about the political process in Star Wars, namely the prequel trilogy, which a lot of people have kind of negative feelings towards. But really, it does a great job of talking about how a politician, a senator in that case, um, rose to power in a political government system by manipulating wars, by feeding off of people's emotions, by doing all different kinds of machinations to basically take over the universe. And it's really kind of like the sci-fi equivalent of that House of Cards series, right? Where this guy who's a
Mhm.
senator kind of manipulates his way up to become the president, and he does a lot of shady stuff along the way. He puts a lot of stuff under the rug. He hides a lot of stuff. He kills a lot of people. So it's no different than the Emperor in Star Wars of how his beginning roots of how that happened. So I started developing this template of this concept I called intergalactic totalitarianism, which is basically like um, what he did was so similar to what we see in our world. And I wanted to kind of go through that kind of step by step, the whole, problem reaction solution process that we all know about, how there's a problem and they want to get a reaction to, get more and more control to solve this problem. So that's what I ended up doing. So I wrote a book about that. It came out just a few months ago called Intergalactic Totalitarianism. There's a great picture of the Death Star destroying Earth. Really great art that a guy I knew drew. So, yeah, so that came out a few months ago. I just released an audiobook version of it as well. I've been getting really good feedback on it. So it's been a fun process. I mean, the process of writing is a beast. I've been doing this podcast thing for a while, but the process of writing is so involved, a lot more involved than I ever thought it would be. But I'm
Yeah.
glad it feels very satisfying to get that out and get it into the marketplace.
Yeah, definitely, man. It's tough work. It always it seems takes longer than you anticipate or even predict. Uh, but yeah, it can be very. Some days it's like it flows out, and then other days it's like sludge in a rusted like faucet or something like that. I'm trying to think of a good analogy, but uh, that's something I wanted to ask too. Was when did you first encounter Star Wars as a child, and then did you go a on a hiatus in between when you watched movies? For example, speaking for myself, I didn't. I don't think I really watched them in high school, but growing up as a child, they were really big part of movies we loved, and then I stopped. And then when I was in college, I rewatched I think all of them, and that had a really big impact on me because I was watching them with such a different perspective. I saw the darkness that I didn't see before in the third one, for example. But like you mentioned, the geopolitical kind of analogies or allegories, similarities, was also something I think I missed as a child, which makes sense, right? So did you have that sort of experience? And then when was the first time you remember encountering that? Maybe it was a video game, because some people, the video games were first.
Yeah, yeah, I love hearing all the different kinds of stories about like even people who watched him like out of order. Like there's a podcast I listened to where like the first one he saw was Return of the Jedi. So it's like you're catching
Oh,
like the final one of the trilogy. That's the first one you saw. It's kind of a weird entry, but you're right. People get this stuff at different times and different reasonings and different mediums as well. So yeah, so it was probably the mid 90s. I was probably in middle. So I'm 37 now. So it was probably 1995, 1996. I was in middle school, and I think a friend of mine came over and brought the original trilogy over. Before he did all the crazy special editions and all that crazy crap. But we watched those movies, and some of the things that still stick out to me are things that like really don't seem like a whole lot in the grand scheme of things. But like in the first movie, one thing that really stood out to me was um, for one, it was a sci-fi movie, but it looked almost kind of like dirty. If you compare Star Wars to something like 2001: A Space Odyssey, where everything is like clean and pristine, like they give you this vision of the future where everything is like pristine and clean and all this stuff. And in Star Wars, it's kind of like a dirty, used universe, because you start off after this empire has basically destroyed and ruined everything. So you kind of get this landscape that it's science fiction, but you're in a desert and using these weird machines and stuff. But I always remember the guy who got his arm cut off by Obi-Wan Kenobi. They're in the bar there, and I just remember seeing this like bloody arm laying on the ground. Like, man, this is some wild stuff. It's back when like there was that weird line between what was PG and PG-13. So it was
mhm.
just a really weird thing to see in that movie. But so I kind of got into Star Wars at an interesting time. Like I talked a little bit about those special edition movies that Lucas released for the 20th anniversary of the original movie in 1997. So it's really interesting that I got into the original movies in like 95, 96, and then they re-released them in the theaters for the first time in a long time. So then actually being a new fan, I got to go see them in the theater, which was, somebody my age could never say that they went to see him in, 77 or 1980. So that was a pretty awesome experience. And then just a year or two later, then the prequel movies came out. So it was like a whole deluge for like a 10-year period for me from like 95 to like 2005. It was like really, really hardcore into it for a long time. But yeah, I will say similar to you, like, at certain points, it kind of went by the wayside, right? Like those movies ended, and then I kind of, put them to the side for a while. And then the past few years, I kind of started watching them again, like you said, with new eyes. And I'm like, wow, there's some really deep stuff in here, like stuff that I glossed over as a kid, like episode 1, The Phantom Menace. It starts off, you get that really great title crawl, right? Where it sets up the movie, this is what's going on. And I think episode 1, The Phantom Menace, had something like, there was a taxation of trade routes or something in the galaxy. And like, as a kid, you're like, oh, what the hell does that mean? Like, who cares about like some trade dispute? But watching it again as an adult, like that's how wars start, is over money. And you see that that's just a proxy that Palpatine, the senator, used to get people to say, listen, we need a new leader that's going to help fight this a crisis that brewed out of it, and I'm the person to do it. So it seemed like a very benign thing, just like a lot of events in our world, just in a vacuum, doesn't seem like a big deal. But it's just point A and a step from A to Z. So yeah, I kind of fell off Star Wars for a little while, got into other stuff, in college years, things like that. But then past few years came back and I'm like, wow, there's a lot of really great parallels and a lot of great like life lessons too that you don't always see with all the newer kind of Marvel stuff that's come out. It's kind of very cookie cutter. Whereas I think
Yes.
those, George Lucas's 6 Star Wars movies had a lot of really great content and a lot of kind of a caution, like the prequel is kind of a cautionary tale, right? About, choosing the light versus choosing the dark, even to the extent of you can be doing something you think is right, but you are still in the wrong. Just like, in every movie, a villain always sees themselves as the hero, just like the hero sees themselves as the hero. So you look at Anakin Skywalker, who becomes Darth Vader, he was the hero for those first few movies, right? And then he slowly turns and turns, and the thing that gets him to turn to the dark side is he wants to help people. He wants to help save people from dying. But the irony of it that Lucas puts in there is, no matter what your noble intentions are, that could still be a breeding ground for evil, and he ends up killing a lot of people to save people from dying. So it's a really almost a tragic comedy at that point. And but yeah, as an adult, you really kind of key in on some of those elements that you didn't really realize as a kid.
Which one is your favorite?
I would probably say like The Empire Strikes Back is probably my favorite Star Wars movie, maybe my favorite movie of all time, just because there's a lot of great lessons in there, specifically from like Luke training with Yoda. A lot of
Oh yeah,
really
that's when he goes off to train with Yoda. Yeah, yeah, that's a great one.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and just that movie in general it kind of ends on a down note. Normally when you see a sequel to a movie that was very successful, the sequel is kind of just a cookie cutter of that, but just in a different location or something. But what Lucas did with that was like, he's like, okay, the heroes won this first one, okay, but the next movie they're just going to get their ass kicked the whole time, and that's what happens. They get their ass kicked, they get chased across the galaxy. Han Solo gets frozen in carbonite. Luke gets his arm chopped off, and it seems very bleak in the end, but there's a lot of great lessons that Yoda teaches Luke that he doesn't realize in that movie, but he realizes in the next movie about, completing your training. You can't be a good friend, you can't be a good leader unless you finish the training and know what you need to do to fight these battles the right way, instead of rushing off in an emotional sense, like he rushed off emotionally to face Darth Vader and ended up, almost dying. And Yoda really teaches him that there's a great, I think it's one of the greatest scenes I think in cinema, is where Luke is training with Yoda, and he senses this darkness. He senses something. He starts going towards this cave. It's like leading him towards, the force is leading him towards this cave, and he's like, what's in there? And Yoda looks back to me. He says, what's in there? He says, only what you take with you. And it's one of those things that, like you said, doesn't hit you as a kid. But what ends up happening is he goes into this cave, and this whole cave is an illusion. And this cave presents itself differently to different people. It basically presents like your innermost fear to you. They kind of did something similar like the Harry Potter movies, where there was this closet of like, whatever you open it, there's a crazy monster, whatever the thing you fear the most is. So he goes in this cave and then fights this vision of Darth Vader. And, before he went in, Yoda told him, it's like, you won't need your weapons. So he's like, leave your weapons here. But Luke takes them anyway. So he goes into this cave, fights a vision of Darth Vader, which isn't real. And he slices Darth Vader's head off. And it rolls to the ground. And the faceplate of Darth Vader's mask comes off. And it's Luke's face. So Yoda is telling him that when you rush into a situation without all the knowledge, without all the understanding, without the right things on your side, you could basically become that thing that you fear, that thing that you hate. And sure enough, that is great foreshadowing for something that happens at the end of Return of the Jedi, the next movie, where Luke is pounding on Darth Vader, right, in anger. He's about to kill Darth Vader. And the Emperor's like, hey, take his place at my side. And then Luke looks down at his hand, and he's like, he has a mechanical hand now because Vader chopped it off. And he looks down at his hand, and he's like, basically in his mind, he's like, Yoda's right. He's like, I'm becoming Darth Vader if I follow this path. I could be encased in this metal suit just like my father was if I continue down this dark path. So a lot of really great symbolism from Yoda in that movie. Another thing, when he lifts that X-Wing out of the swamp to help Luke out, really great scene, because Luke's like, oh, I can't reach this thing with the Force. It's too big, whatever. And Yoda's like, size doesn't matter. You can accomplish great things more than you could ever imagine if you put your mind to it, and if you're in the right frame of mind. And Yoda ends up being able to lift this huge object, and Luke is like, I can't believe it. And Yoda's like, yeah, that's why you fail, because you didn't believe it. So some really almost like really Zen, like Japanese type wisdom that Yoda displayed in those movies, like a kung fu master in a sci-fi universe, is kind of how I saw that. So I think that's one of the greatest movies, and people don't realize it too. There's a lot of really great humor in that movie too. It's really funny throughout, like the stuff with Han Solo and the princess and C-3PO. It's a really funny movie, but it really it's a cautionary tale just like the story of Anakin Skywalker is like, you rush out to think you can do something. Luke was all full of himself. He had an ego. He's like, I destroyed the Death Star. I can do whatever I want. And then the real world hit him in the face, and he had to learn those lessons. And we all have to learn those lessons. We all have to take those lumps in life, but it's how we respond to those. Some people can just crumble and say, "Oh my gosh, the world is so terrible. Why is this happening to me?" But other people can take
Mhm.
that and say, "Listen, I've been through some stuff. I know what it's like down here. Let me try to get back up here." So I think it's a great story, and it really shows really good character development. He goes through ups and downs, which I don't think a lot of characters in movies nowadays really have that kind of journey like Luke Skywalker did. So I think that movie was very pivotal in showing his journey.
Do you have a favorite, a minor character in the universe? Someone who's not on screen, maybe as much as Luke or Anakin or yeah, anybody that comes to mind?
A minor character, minor character. Um, I think the most important character I think throughout a lot of the movies are the robots. R2D2. I guess I wouldn't really consider him a minor character, but he's
Mm.
really the one that helps save the day a lot of the times. Which is really cool. Which is really cool, but also at the same time, it makes me think. Was there this concerted effort to show that robotics are really the way to save us in the future, and without robotics, we can't accomplish things. So there's always that little conspiracy in the back of my mind. But just the fact that this little robot was able to help him get out of a lot of these jams was really cool. I like a lot of the robots, a lot of the droid characters they had throughout.
Yeah, they definitely in the newer movies played up the robot characters as being more pets. I think, whereas
Hmm.
I felt in the first six, it was it's not something that I noticed per se, but it's something that they do kind of play that role or archetype of a character a bit. Speaking of that, what are your thoughts on the transition or the difference between the Lucas era Star Wars and then post?
Yeah, with like the Disney movies.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. There is some good stuff I will say in the Disney movies. I'm not going to completely bash on them, but I will bash
Mhm.
on them. There's just something that is lost a little bit in those movies, and it's one of those things that it's kind of hard to put into words sometimes. But just like does this feel like this, right? Like the job I've been in this job for at my day job for 10 years or so, and I know when things are right or when things aren't right, just because I know how all the numbers work and how all this stuff works. So it's like with these movies, something just feels off from what Star Wars should be. And
Mhm.
one of the problems I will say is that they treated they treated the Star Wars franchise like it was a Marvel superhero movie. They wanted to pump as many of these out as possible, just because they wanted to get a return on investment for their shareholders. Which, I mean, I don't blame them. They paid like something like $4.2 billion for the Star Wars
Mhm.
properties in
Mhm.
about 10 years ago, I think. So I mean, it makes sense. They want to make money on this, and I get it. That's fine. But with Star Wars, it's more of I would say it needs to be handled a little bit more delicately. Like we talked about a little bit. There's a lot more mythology. There's a lot more ancient
Yeah,
wisdom and stuff
yeah.
associated with Star Wars versus like Iron Man. Which I have no problem with Iron Man or the Marvel stuff, but there's just something that those movies don't have that Star Wars has.
Yeah.
Symbolically, mythologically. I mean, Star Wars, I would say, is closer to like Greek mythology than
Yeah. Yeah.
another sci-fi property or like the Marvel stuff, right? Because it has that hero's journey. It has all these
Mhm.
characters that go on all these different journeys, and the people they meet along the way, etc. So I think they rushed. Basically, what I'm trying to say is they rushed the production of these movies, and by rushing the production of them, for one, you don't get to see what the reaction of movie A is when you're working on movie B. So basically, the episode 7, The Force Awakens, that came out in 2015, but they were already working on episode 8 before episode 7 even came out. and it was a different director, kind of a whole different story. So they kind of had like two different teams working on these movies, and when you watch them back to back, they don't flow. It doesn't flow. It doesn't flow together.
Hmm.
And specifically Episode 8, The Last Jedi, which is one of like the most divisive movies in Star Wars, I would say. The director Rian Johnson, what he wanted to do was, and he said this flat out, he's like, I want to subvert people's expectations. He's like, I want to take what people think is going to happen and basically flip it on its head. Okay. And, you know, on its face, that doesn't sound like a bad thing, but the way he did it just rubbed a lot of fans the wrong way, especially the character of Luke Skywalker. You know, like we talked about, Luke Skywalker, went on this great hero's journey. You know, from farm boy to destroying the Death Star to facing trials and tribulations and then achieving victory in the end. You know, he went on this great heroic journey, and you expected him to still be this somewhat heroic character in the future, but he was like this hermit living on an island, like sad about a lot of stuff that happened. Um,
Yeah.
and there was something um, there was just something that was off to that character, something that was off to that character to me. And you know, even with Episode 7, The Force Awakens, which I think was the best of the three trilogy movies, um, they never had like the core characters together on the screen at the same time, like Han,
Right.
Luke, and
Right.
Leia and Chewie. Like
Yeah.
that's like one of those things. Like, why would you not give the fans what they want to see? You know, they love those characters. They want to see them go on like one more journey together. You know,
Hmm.
I'm sure one or two of them is going to die here or there, but let them have that journey again, just kind of one more time. You know, one more for the road, one more, and see what happens. But they went as far away from that as possible. They had all those characters spread throughout, doing all different kinds of things, and they had so many different directors fired. They had lots of writers fired throughout this whole process. So the story just didn't line up correctly. They brought back the Emperor after he died in the Episode 9.
That was ridiculous.
That was ridiculous. And
Uh,
they even had the line in the movie like, well, somehow Palpatine returned. Like I'm like, that's seriously what you're gonna say? That's what you're gonna give it to us? Like
it's yeah.
somehow he returned? Like I just I think they rushed the production of him. I will say the one spin-off movie, the Rogue One movie, I don't know, did you see that one?
That's the best. I haven't seen them all, I will say, because I kind of gave up, to be
Yeah.
honest. But I will say, Rogue One, it did move me. There were two
Yeah.
moments where it was like, "Whoa, that was good!" Like you felt it in your chest.
Yes.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, it was incredible. You know, it's for anybody who doesn't know, it was a kind of a one-off movie, but it's pretty much a prequel to the original Star Wars because it ends
Hmm.
right where that first movie begins, about
Hmm.
how they got the Death Star plans, which is a really great story and a whole new set of characters that nobody knew, which I thought was
Yeah,
a really
I thought
bold
it was.
move.
Yeah, I thought it was very well done. Yeah, and like you said, it does tell an interesting part of the backstory of that. But yeah, I don't even know. I stopped watching. Like, this- I was watching it with people in my family, the Han Solo one,
Oh
and
yeah,
I can't. I just stopped and I never started again. I didn't even finish it. And the other one, I don't even know if I started it. The most recent one with Palpatine, whichever one that was. So I
yeah,
kind of gave up a little bit. But yeah, I thought Rogue One was good. Yeah.
yeah, and I think there just wasn't any really good like mythological elements to it.
Hmm.
I
Hmm.
just don't think Al in the comments, the mouse is purely commercial, not genuine. Absolutely, absolutely. It's just basically like a printing press for money. That's all. They just want more and more money. They want to just pump these out like it's a factory, and not really
Hmm.
understand what Star Wars is all about. And you know, they even George Lucas, after he sold the company, he wanted to kind of be still a little bit involved in kind of the story going forward, but they basically just wrote it without him.
Hmm.
And you know, kind of which you know, to their credit, I mean, they own it; they can do whatever they want. But it probably would have served them best to have him as an advisor at least, because he actually did already have a loose story drawn out for those the sequel trilogy that he was working on before he sold the company. It was never really fully fleshed out, but he had talked to like you know Harrison Ford and Carrie Fisher and Mark Hamill about doing this. And it was kind of sort of I wouldn't say in pre-production, but they had been having conversations about this. So had he not sold the company, he may still have went ahead and made it. But yeah, they did themselves a disservice by not having him actively involved. Now, I will say they've done a really great job with the new shows, right? Like the Mandalorian show that came out a few years ago.
I just
Um,
finished that
yeah,
actually
it's
last week.
incredible.
I thought I was surprised. It's I would say great even. I'm pretty
Yeah,
tough on because I'm a huge Star Wars guy too, but I would say it's possibly even great. You
yeah,
know, very few, if any, throwaway, the cheesy Marvel-esque moments where they
yeah,
just don't they allow a bit of acting, which I like.
yeah.
Um,
Yeah, and the fact that what's so good about that is a character who can act with a helmet on, like somebody who can act when you don't see their facial expressions, um, just by how they're reading the dialogue, by their mannerisms and stuff. I think that's tremendous acting. I mean, I think
That's a
that's
great
as
point. That's a great point, Kyle. And you sound like an acting teacher I had because I took a couple classes in college, and I did one play randomly in college when I was a senior. I don't just really randomly. I never did that stuff growing up, the theater, the thespian stuff, because I was always occupied with athletics. But yeah, it's tough to do that with your body and your voice, and you can't see the face, especially for film
yeah.
because the face is so it can be two-thirds of the screen sometimes or the whole screen. So yeah, that's a great
Yeah.
point.
And even, in Jordan, Lucas did that really great, even like with R2D2. I mean, he's a robot, but you could sense his emotions. I mean, they would have him like rock back and forth when he was happy, and there would be like the sound effect, be like, oh, like when he was sad. Like to be able to get emotions out of non-human characters, I think is a very, or with the mask, etc., is really great acting. But yeah, with John Favreau heading up that show and Dave Filoni, who has done a lot of Star Wars animated shows in the past,
Mhm.
writing that with him. Those two guys, like they know Star Wars. Like those are the two closest guys to George Lucas ideology that they have working in the company right now. So, in my opinion, they need to be in charge of everything moving forward because like you said, they know the stuff. It's not cheesy, it's not corny, like even the sets, even how they set up all the scenery, the environments, how the characters
Mhm.
talk, how the characters move, the backgrounds, like they went through painstaking efforts to try to make it look like Star Wars. And when it looks and feels like it, like that's what I would say as a comparison to the sequel trilogy. This looked like Star Wars. That was like kind of a corny sci-fi ish movie with Star Wars slapped on it as a label.
Yeah, yeah, and I thought it was cool how at the end of the show, I think, yeah, for The Mandalorian, they would show like the storyboarding or the
Yes,
artwork. That was really
yes.
cool, and then play the music. Yeah, it was well done. And then I saw the new one too, Boba Fett. I
Hmm.
thought was good. I don't know if I finished that one or not,
Yeah, it was
but
it was pretty good. They kind
mm,
of went with kind of that same Mandalorian template and kind of thing. But a lot
mm,
of fans got a little upset with it because you look at the Mandalorian character and he's almost like a quasi Boba Fett. So it's like they almost gave. I was listening to a podcast the other day and they made a good point. They say they gave all the good Boba Fett stuff to the Mandalorian, and then when the Boba Fett show came out, they kind of had to recreate him in a different light, which I think worked pretty good. But it kind of rubbed some people the wrong way. But
because
but
he was older, or
because he was older, he didn't seem like that badass bounty hunter that he used to be. But to the point of the story, for those who don't know about this Boba Fett story, it takes place after he gets swallowed up by that Sarlacc pit in Return of the Jedi. So he basically, going back to kind of a mythological element, he basically goes like into an abyss, right? He goes into an abyss, he goes below, he goes underground, and he emerges as somebody else, as a new character, as a new character, and he has to basically recreate his whole life again. He has nothing. He's kind of wandering around the desert for a while and stuff, with the Tusken Raider and the Sand People and all that stuff. And it's interesting. It's an interesting take, but yeah, he had to completely change who he was
Mhm.
after that event happened. And whether they completely told that story correctly or not, I guess it's still up for discussion. We'll see if they do second season, but. I think it looked great. It was awesome. If you haven't seen the last episode of it, you'll love it. There's some really cool stuff in there. So they did a really good job with that. I think Mandalorian season 3 is coming
Mhm.
out this year or next year. I don't know. They're really they're really heading more towards, I think, the Disney Plus TV series kind of thing.
Mm.
Now, I think after the movies kind of, I wouldn't say they bombed, but they kind of just it didn't rub people the right way. So they're really heading mostly towards the TV now, and
Yeah.
then the Obi-Wan Kenobi series
Yep.
coming out in
Yeah.
a few months. That looks pretty killer.
Yeah, that's in May. I think it's a 6-part series, if I'm
Yeah,
not mistaken.
yeah, it's six or seven, something like that. Yeah, and it's debuting on the anniversary of the original Star Wars, May 25th. So that's gonna be pretty cool. We'll see how they handle that. Like the Boba Fett rubbed a few people the wrong way because they had some ideas about what they thought Boba Fett was. So I'm a little anxious about how this is going to work out because everybody loves Obi-Wan Kenobi. He's one of the most central characters in pretty much
That's
the first six
that's
movies.
kind of true. I think you'll be hard pressed to find someone who doesn't like him. He's probably the most well liked character. I would say is Obi-Wan.
Well, it's funny, my wife, she doesn't like the Obi-Wan in the prequels with
Oh,
the
really?
Ewan McGregor character. I don't know why. Just
Mm.
just something about him. She's like, I just don't. I just can't stand him. So I don't think I'm going to get her to watch this one with me. But anyways, that's fine. I'll watch it at 4 a.m. when it comes out. Anyways.
Sure, sure. No, yeah, no worries. Of the prequels, do you have a favorite? And if so, which one is that?
Yeah, I'd probably say it's kind of a toss up for me. Episode 1, The Phantom Menace. It got a lot of flack when it came out for the Jar Jar Binks stuff, but there's a lot of really great wisdom in that, specifically from the Qui-Gon Jinn character,
Mm.
speaking to Obi-Wan Kenobi, who he was training at the time. So kind of similar to like the wisdom you see of Yoda. Qui-Gon lays a lot of really great stuff on him as well. Like he has a really great quote in that movie. He says, your focus determines your reality. And I think that's one of the most stellar quotes I've heard in the past 20 years. Because think about everything that we've been through the past few years in this world. All kinds of craziness happening. But if you choose to put that stuff on the sidelines and just live your life and love your family, and if you're into religion or spirituality, if you focus on that stuff versus all the bad stuff coming out in the world, you're probably likely to live a happier life than if you're constantly watching Fox News and they're telling you about how all the terrible things, or you're watching CNN, they're telling you about the terrible news on the other side. So there's something to be said about your focus determines your reality. What are you focusing on? Where is your attention being placed? So for the Phantom Menace, I think there's a lot of great quotes in there, but I think Revenge of the Sith, the last chapter, the downfall of Anakin Skywalker is really great. That movie has probably given me a lot of podcast content because a lot of the things that happened in that movie, a few examples. For one, you have, like you said, the whole problem, reaction, solution thing. So in that movie, you have Palpatine, who's become the Supreme Chancellor of the Republic at this point. He's getting a send through the dark side of it, because he's the Dark Lord, of course. He's getting this sense that the Jedi want to take him out, and the Jedi are starting to get the sense that he is not who they think he is. So he's starting to convince Anakin Skywalker that maybe there's something going on here. So what ends up happening is that the Jedi confront him and say, "Listen, we got to take you into custody. We're taking you on trial. You're the Sith Lord we've been looking for, etc." And he ends up, fighting them in his office there. Which I don't know why he has an office. He's like sitting at a desk. Like, what is he doing? Like, is he doing paperwork or something? I don't know. But he fights all these Jedi off. He kills a bunch of them. In the process, his face gets disfigured. But Anakin Skywalker turns to the dark side. So he so that's the problem is this Jedi attack, and his face is deformed in the process of this. So he now becomes this wretched looking like wizard witch looking person, right? Just think a good analogy. Think of like in the movie Snow White, like the evil queen morphs into that evil witch, and like the question is that her true persona or is it something else? So he goes before the Senate and says, "Listen, the Jedi attacked me without provocation. We need to take them out. And then everybody cheers, right? So there's your reaction. We need to take these guys out because they attacked the Chancellor. They've now vilified the Jedi against the whole universe. And then the solution, it's the final solution. It's basically genocide against the Jedi. So they go throughout the whole universe and wipe all of them out except Yoda and Obi-Wan. Everybody, they're all gone. But you see how he manipulates this event. Because he plays off like he's a victim. He says, "Listen, I was attacked. They did this. They did that." In the novelization of that movie, it even goes so far as to say that he played for the Senate an audio recording of them attacking him, but he took out all the parts of him attacking. So it basically sounded to them like he was being assaulted, right? It was kind of your, January 6th in space, if you kind of want to think about it that way. So he basically vilified this whole the whole Jedi to the universe and worked that to his advantage. So there's that kind of manipulation there, and it got everybody in the universe to think, oh, the Jedi are evil. They tried to kill the Chancellor, this and that. When in all reality, the Chancellor was one that was evil. They were trying to dethrone him and restore order, but he flipped the script. And then the other thing that I thought was really interesting, another thing I didn't pick up on as a kid, there was this whole faction called the Trade Federation that helped Palpatine out throughout the whole prequel trilogy. And their whole deal was that they created an army of droids. And the whole point of it was to be a fake, basically a fake enemy to the Galactic Republic, which he and all the senators worked for. So he basically in the background manipulated a war between this droid army and the Republic. And so he manipulated this whole war. He had the Trade Federation on board. They knew what was going on. But after he took out all the Jedi and really had no competition left in the universe, he had no need for the Trade Federation anymore. So he basically went ahead and told Darth Vader, go wipe all these guys out, right? So he told all these guys, listen, Darth Vader's coming. He's going to help take care of you guys. So Vader goes there, wipes them all out. So as a kid, you don't really realize what's happening there. But as an adult, I'm like, my God, it's the useful idiots, right? It's the useful idiots in, communist Russia who help out the regime come to power, and they're annihilated just like everybody else. They thought that they were going to be aligned with this new government, this new fascist totalitarian government that they helped bring to power. But in the end, they really knew too much, and it wasn't worth to Palpatine. It wasn't worth any of letting anything slip about who he really was. So Vader went and starts wiping these guys out, and one of the guys was like, he's like, what are you doing? Palpatine promised us peace, and the novelization even throws in a kind of a corny line. Vader says like, no, he promised you be left in pieces. He's like, the transmission was a little garbled. You missed that part. So it's kind of like some dark humor in there. But it's the whole thing about aligning yourself with a totalitarian government, which is kind of part of my book, is that all the people in America now that think that they're for the current government that's in place, they really don't care about you. They don't care about you, just like they don't care about the opposition. And if you think that you're going to come to power along with these people, they will throw you to the wayside as soon as your usefulness runs out. And I had never really seen that in a movie before, but they had it in Star Wars, and I think Lucas was a genius for putting that in there, because I think a lot of people wouldn't even have thought of that, of putting something like that in there, right? Kind of let it go. He's rolling, the universe is over. But it even goes a step further in not really in the books, but in some other supplemental materials, that not only did he take out all the leaders of this trade federation, and the trade federation, for anyone who doesn't know, is basically like your galactic Fortune 500, right? It's like your Amazons, your manufacturing, your industry companies. They ran it all, right? It's the whole corporate scheme. So he cuts off all their heads basically, and then he takes all those organizations and then puts them under the government. So now the government is now also running all of the commerce and everything as well. So not only is it running the political wing, it's also running all the economy as well. So it's a humongous scheme now that he
Mhm.
he runs for several years. So I would say, yeah, Revenge of the Sith. There's a lot of really good stuff in there, but like I kind of talked about at the top, Anakin really wanted to help save his wife from dying. He was having these dreams of his wife dying in childbirth, and Palpatine told him like, listen, I have the power to help save her. So if you join me, we're gonna figure it out. And Anakin, being a young, kind of naive kind of kid, basically, he's like, oh, okay, cool, yeah, well, whatever you need me to do. And he ends up killing all these people. He ends up having a duel with Obi-Wan, and he almost dies. But in the end, talk about another useful idiot. The Palpatine tells him, he's like, listen, in all the fighting and everything that happened, you killed your wife. So in the end of it, the complete irony is that he wanted to try to learn these powers to help save his wife, but then his wife ends up dying. I don't think he didn't really kill her. I think the Emperor may have had some machinations with that, but she ends up dying anyways.
Mhm.
And you see, and so it goes to the whole point again about the being a useful idiot, is that you think these people have your best interests in mind, but they don't. And Palpatine only cared about himself. He only used Darth Vader as a tool to gain more and more power, because he needed a right hand man. And everybody thinks about Darth Vader, and listen, I have a lot of great Darth Vader toys and stuff back here. He's a great character, but in the end, he's really nothing more than a useful idiot upon a tool of the Emperor. And
Mhm.
he realizes that, at the very end of his life, and is able to kind of turn back. But in most situations, people that are in that mindset and mentality, they don't realize it until it's too late, and then it's over with. So it's a really good cautionary tale, I think, from a lot of different perspectives.
Yeah, I would agree. I think it's my favorite prequel and possibly my favorite overall. Maybe word for the fifth one. It's one of those two. But it was the one that affected me the most upon rewatching it. I think
Yeah.
uh, more so than any of the other ones.
Yeah, and he had to, like, he had to kill like a group of kids. I mean, it was like
Yeah, yeah,
really, really dark. Like,
yeah.
but he was so bought in at this point that that was the right thing to do, and to
Mhm.
help. And it's just so ironic, to save people from dying, you have to kill people, and it just
Yeah,
it's just so backwards. It's fascinating, but
yeah,
people
yeah.
people think that way in our world too.
No, yeah, definitely. Especially with like in light of our current geopolitical situation in Ukraine and Russia, and people calling for the no fly zone. Yeah, that's very accurate. And you got a comment here. The Andor series will be a prequel of Rogue One movie coming
Yes.
out in August.
Yes.
Takes place between episodes 3 and 4.
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah, I'm really looking
so,
forward to that. So, if anybody's know, Cassian Andor, he's one of the heroes in that Rogue One movie, and he's basically like just kind of a rebel spy going around trying to rally all these different rebel cells from around the universe and kind of get them on the
mm,
same page. And he's a very interesting character because what Cassian Andor shows in that Rogue One movie is that while they're trying to form this rebellion to fight against the evil empire, to take out the evil empire, he has to do some kind of nasty things to accomplish his missions too. So
mm,
there's a scene, I think, at the very beginning of the movie where he's meeting up with another rebel spy, and this guy's kind of injured. He's handicapped. He has like a cane or something. His leg isn't working. So he meets this guy in a dark corridor, and he gets information, etc. But then like the stormtroopers catch on to that they're there, and this guy's like, "Oh, you got to help me get out of here." But he realizes that if he Andor realizes if he doesn't get out of there now, that they're both dead. So he basically blasts this guy in the chest, kills him, and gets out. So it shows that there's a lot of really uncomfortable decisions that need to be
mhm,
made, even in something like that, for the common good, And it's an interesting ethical dilemma if you think about it. That try if you want to take out somebody that's evil, you kind of have to think like you're evil. Like, think about the whole concept of like the FBI profilers and stuff with serial killers, right? Like, to understand who these people are, we really have to get into their minds.
mhm,
And in the concept of that, it's just, when you're in a when you're with this rebellion trying to fight the power, by doing some of these evil deeds to take out the evil ones, are you any better? It's an unanswerable question. But if you think about it too, the rebels destroying the Death Star, depending on what side you're looking at it from, was basically like a terrorist attack. You know, there's really great memes going around about it shows Luke Skywalker and it says, farm boy radicalized by an ancient cult to destroy the government stronghold. And like that's really, if you think about it in those terms, yeah, that's kind of what it is. But
Yeah.
the whole Cassian Andor character is a very interesting, fascinating character, and I'm curious to see kind of how they develop him in that series. It's gonna be pretty good.
What are your thoughts on the Jedi philosophy on attachment? And Yoda saying attachment is the leads to jealousy, which is the shadow of greed, and how they're basically taught not to be attached to people.
Yeah, it's one of those things where um it's something it's yeah, it's part of the Jedi creed that attachment is forbidden. Um but Anakin even brings this up to Padme, I think in episode 2. He's like, "Well, we're instructed however, we're instructed to love." So they're instructed to love people because they're the protectors of peace and justice in the galaxy. So they're supposed to inherently love people, but it's
Mm,
whenever it becomes an attachment, almost kind of like I would say it almost kind of like an addiction. So in that third movie, he was so addicted to
mm,
saving her from death that he gave up the Jedi code. Um, so it's kind of an interesting thing, and there's a lot of different takes on it of what that attachment really means. And I think to a younger Jedi like Anakin was, them saying that makes you want to run another direction, right? It's like when your parents tell me like, oh, you shouldn't do that, or don't listen to that music, or don't hang out with those people. You want to end up doing that because they're telling you not to,
mm.
So it's a strict code, but I don't know that it's necessarily in line with what it should be. I think one of the problems with the Jedi in the prequels is that I would consider it more like akin to like the Catholic Church, right? Where there's a lot of different rules and regulations and rituals and things they had to follow. Whereas a true Jedi is something that really can't be defined by a finite set of rules. A true Jedi knows there may be different things you need to do in different situations, and just because it broke this Jedi code doesn't mean that you're wrong or you're on the dark side. It's just that you use a little bit of that Jedi intuition. I think they put too much restrictions on those kind of things because if you think about this, they say attachment is what caused Anakin to turn to the dark side, but attachment is really what brought him back in the very end of his life because of his attachment to his son.
Right,
And
right.
if Luke didn't have an attachment to try to save his father, he never would have been able to save his father and kill the Emperor and save the universe. So I think
Mm,
I think they realized some of that stuff too late. That those finite Jedi codes
yeah.
were really just words on a page that really didn't.
Mm,
There's a lot more new. I think there's a lot more nuance to it than they realized. Even in the end, before Luke went to face Darth Vader for that final time, both Obi-Wan and Yoda were basically like, yeah, you need to go kill him. You need to kill him. He's evil. He's twisted. He's a robotic person. You need to just go and kill him and take him out. But Luke was like, no. He's like, I sense that there's good in him, and I think we can
mm,
I can save him. And sure
mm.
enough, that attachment to who was actually inside of that metal suit is what saved him and what saved his father and what saved the universe. So I think they were definitely wrong about holding on to that stringent rule because it may have caused Anakin to continue on the light side.
Do you think that people are indeed chosen and that there are chosen peoples, whatever that may mean?
In Star Wars, you mean?
Well, just the idea of being the chosen one, or for example, I mean, there are groups in the world who think they are chosen people or God's chosen people. Do you think that is the case, that there are people that are chosen for certain, whether it's to be a Jedi or to be something else? I don't know. Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah. It's interesting because in Star Wars, they kind of set up these stories almost as if the most powerful people are only in kind of these family lineages, which I think they've kind of started to get away from a little bit. I think the idea in Star Wars is that anybody can accomplish anything. But yeah, just like with biblical prophecy in Star Wars, there's prophecy as well. There was the prophecy that there would be a chosen one that would bring balance to the universe. And I think people can misinterpret those kind of things. I think, in Star Wars, Anakin Skywalker was the chosen one, but it didn't happen in the timeline that everybody thought it would. So if you think the end of that prequel trilogy, even Obi-Wan tells him after he defeats him in battle, he's like, you were the chosen one. You were supposed to defeat the Sith, not join them. And so at that point, Obi-Wan's like, well, I guess he's not the chosen one. I guess it's, somebody else. Maybe it's his son that I'm going to go protect. But really, in
Mm,
the end, without Anakin turning back to the light and killing the Emperor,
yeah.
there would be no peace in the universe. So really, he was the chosen one, but his journey was not in the same trajectory as other people thought.
Imagine. Yeah.
And similarly, a little bit of like a biblical perspective, um, and I won't harp on this too much, but yeah,
No, no,
if
go
you
for it.
follow biblical scriptures, the Israelites are God's chosen people, but similarly to Darth Vader, they kind of have gone away from some of the biblical teachings as far as what the story of Jesus, and fallen away from that. But in the end, will more of them turn back to realizing what that truth is. So kind of a similar path there. So it kind of depends on what your philosophy is and what your religious teaching is. If you follow the Bible like I do, that the Israelites are considered the chosen people, although they don't always um, follow that to a T, if you know what I mean.
Hmm. Hmm. I do. Which maybe we can get into that in a different show, perhaps. But I wanted to ask too about uh, the first couple movies. Well, just in terms of the characters, is there a character that you see as relevant today, given our geopolitical situation? And I know I asked before about a minor characters, but yeah, if there's just like another analysis you want to give for example, like who Palpatine might represent. I've heard him described as representing the devil itself, or just politicians in general. Yeah, any thoughts there?
Yeah, Palpatine's an interesting one because all the people in the kind of the conspiracy community talk about all these, right, the secret societies and stuff that run the world, whether it's the Illuminati or Freemasons or Cabal, whatever you want to call it. That there's just kind of secret organizations that kind of run things, and you can kind of take that in all kinds of different directions. Now, in Star Wars, Palpatine, his basically his shadow self, Darth Sidious, was the one that was really pulling the strings in the galaxy. So if you think about it, he in and of himself was like that Illuminati. He was that controlling force behind the scenes, but just one person, right? It wasn't a whole series of families, stretched geopolitically across the world.
Right, right.
So yeah, but people have been using Palpatine as a proxy for a lot of stuff recently. They said like, oh, Putin is Palpatine, or this person is Palpatine, and they had Trump as like Darth Vader a few years ago and stuff, and it's all dependent and it's all subjective on people's different political ideas. But I think Palpatine is definitely something kind of a level above kind of the puppet governments that are kind of set up all around the world. Um,
Hmm.
Now, one interesting thing, talk about a character. Everybody knows that character of Jar Jar Binks, right, from episode one.
Yeah.
Um, he uh, he actually does one of the most important things in the whole series. In episode two, he's a senator for some reason, and he grants Palpatine because they're trying to combat this threat. There's a threat from this droid army, And so they said they need to create an army. And Palpatine's like, well, I'm not able to get the votes. If only I had more power in myself, I could do it. But someone needs to put forth a motion. So Jar Jar Binks goes up there and says, hey, we need to grant Palpatine more emergency powers, right? So he's there again, another useful idiot that's used as a pawn to get this guy more and more power. And you can probably, I don't know, there's a lot of different Jar Jar comparisons out there. I mean, I think like, Joe Biden is what I think right off the bat, just kind of a clumsy, bumbling fool that, he seems like an idiot, but like he's coerced to do things that are in other people's best interest that whether or not he even really realizes what he's doing or not is kind of besides the point, but he's getting things accomplished for other people's manipulative goals. So there's kind of one other little comparison there.
Just wrapping up here, Kyle. It's been a great show this evening. I just wanted to get your final thoughts on your podcast. Anything we haven't touched on yet tonight, and then I'll plug your book again, which recently came out: Intergalactic Totalitarianism, Authoritarian Tactics and Traits in a Galaxy Far, Far Away, and a Galaxy Not So Far Away.
It's really wordy, right? Like it should have been like a college course or something.
Yeah.
It's a mouthful. Every time I'm like, gosh, I should have simplified it a little bit. But yeah, dude, thank you so much for having me on. This has been great. We'll have to chat on some more stuff in the future.
Definitely. Yeah.
And keep up the great work yourself. What you did with the Maxwell trial was awesome. Basically getting in everybody's face in there in the streets. I loved it. I loved all of it.
Thank you. Thanks, Kyle.
Yeah. So like you said, the book is out, Intergalactic Totalitarianism. Kindle. It's on Kindle. It's on Amazon. It's a paperback. And just released the audiobook version as well. The audiobook version, it's more than just me reading it. I added, I recorded a bunch of music and stuff to have playing in the background throughout it. So it's almost 4 hours long. So I did get a bunch of, promotional codes. If anybody wants the audiobook for free, if you're listening to this, feel free to, DM me on Instagram or Twitter at conspiracy_Kyle. It's Conspiracy with a K, and I can get you a code to get a free copy of that audiobook. So I just want more and more people to check it out and yeah, throw it to somebody that in your life that likes Star Wars, that maybe not be into politics or conspiracies or stuff. It's kind of a good entry level way to kind of talk about some of the bigger things going on in our world with kind of a parallel of something in our culture that a lot of people know about. So I've always thought that metaphors or parallels between events in our world and in media, whether it's movies or TVs, is always a good segue for certain people. Some people that really kind of gets their gears working. So check it out if you're interested. My podcast is called Conspiracy in the Force. You can find it on any podcasting platform, YouTube. Yeah, that's it.
Awesome. Thank you, Kyle. And likewise, you can find this one anywhere podcasts can be found. For the audio, for the video broadcast, rockfin.com/addiads, ROKFIN.com. Thank you so much, Kyle. Thank you so much to the audience as well. Stay frosty, folks, and we'll see everybody next time.